Hello there. This is a different kind of video I'm going to be doing today to my usual ones. It's one some of you might not like or want to watch. It's one of the ones where I go on about personal issues an awful lot. It's very Slacksarian, shall we say, although I'll be rambling a lot more than Slackser does. I've made fewer notes, fewer plans for it. I do have some notes which I'll be referring to occasionally, but it's pretty much off the top of my head. And the reason there's two reasons why I'm addressing this. I'm making a video about this because you might, this story about airing your dirty laundry in public and things like that. It's always thought to be a bad thing. And I agree with that. I understand it, but I'm doing it. Airing your dirty laundry in public is all very well, or not doing it if you have someone you can speak about these sorts of things privately to, and I don't. The subject matter of this particular video is something I can't talk privately with anyone, really. Possibly my daughter, but I need to speak to somebody else. You guys are really, you are my confidants, my viewers. You are my confidants. And another reason I'm making it, I did think hard about whether to make this video or not, because somebody advised me not to. I did speak privately with someone online about it. They advised me not to make this video. But is the subject, when it comes to the subject matter of this video, the people I'm going to talk about never watch my channel. They never watch my channel anyway, so it won't affect them. Because I'm not going to give you any real names or anything, so I'm just getting my notes up here. I won't be giving any real names or anything, and they never watch anyway. In fact, this is part of the problem. They've never really shown any interest in me at all, or had any real communication with me. And you probably guess I'm referring to my family. I mean, the title of the video says it all: family sadness. I've come to this lovely little spot, actually. It's on the outskirts of Oxford, not far from the cinema that I'm in, actually. It's a little bit of woodland here. I found a little log to sit on, and I probably won't be disturbed, although there is a main road a short distance away. It's a big road. It's quite quiet this time of day. But some people might see me, but, well, I'm just sitting here privately. If I suddenly break off and start talking about I can't talk about bridges in my MGTOW video. Do you remember? If I suddenly broke off and started talking about the structure of bridges, because when someone came along, getting privacy in Oxford is very difficult, even in the countryside areas, outside town, or on the outskirts of town, which is where I am here. Oh, and it's a bit windy too, so I might have to speak up a bit. I hope you can hear me. It's kind of it's nice and warm, but it's a bit breezy today. It's been a pretty rotten month this May. We're nearly at the end of May now, and generally speaking, the weather's been pretty awful, pretty shitty. Oh, I'll be swearing a bit in this video probably, but today's not bad actually. It's been a few spots of rain, but generally it's quite nice. Anyway, I'm rambling. See, that's what I mean by rambling. I'm nervous about talking about this, and it's a very upsetting thing. What happened? What this is about? Something terrible has happened to my family. Not my immediate family, thank God. My extended family. I found it's been my extended family, my big family at large, has been struck down by a terrible tragedy. What happened was a couple of months, just over 2 months ago now, my cousin's husband committed suicide. I heard about this through my dad because he's quite close to that part of the family, which is basically my mum's relatives. There's a little birdie. I thought someone was sneaking up on me. It's a birdie. Yeah, my mum's family, who all live in the Netherlands. Well, there's a couple in South Africa, there's a couple in Indonesia, but most of them live in the Netherlands, which is where my mum comes from. She's a Dutch woman, was a Dutch woman. My cousin, she had a husband who I only met once. I met him once at my mum's funeral in 2006. That's the only time I've ever met him. Just shook his hand and spoke to him briefly. They had 2 children, aged 15 and 12. They have 2 children, aged 15 and 12. And I can't imagine the nightmare they're living through right now, and my cousin. I'll call her Beatrice. It's not her real name. Her real name is actually pretty unpronounceable unless you speak Dutch. Beatrice was married to him. They had 2 children. Like I said, this is why I wouldn't make this video if I thought my family were watching, but they don't watch this channel. This is the thing, you see, they've never really paid any interest in me at all. But it's brought, this event has, even though it's not the same as it happening to someone very close to me, has brought up some feelings in me of maybe remorse or guilt. I don't know what they are, some confused feelings in me. You see, my mum, as you know, turned against me. I've explained before. I'll put a link in the description box of the video where I explain about this. But my mum, basically, my mum and dad were hypnotised by this child abuser. It was essentially a cult. They joined a cult, essentially, of the religious worship of this man who abused me, called Centaur. I've talked about him before. I'll put a link in the description box of the video where I talk about him in detail. I wrote an article as well, which may have some additional information in. After that, my mum my mum was also targeted by Isabel Menzies Live of the Tavistock Institute. I'll put a link in. I've got to remember to put a link in for that as well. Then Isabel Menzies Live of the Tavistock Institute targeted me, and I'll put a link in the description box of that as well. As a result of this, and I believe, well, there may be several reasons, but my mum turned against me. Possibly Isabel poisoned her mind against me, but there was other factors involved as well. And by the time she died in 2006, she absolutely hated me. And she tried to destroy my family. She tried to get my daughter taken into care, all kinds of things like that. It's a horrible situation. I talk about it some more in the background links below. But that's my mum's family. My mum is she's the oldest girl in the family. There were like 6 children. And she was the oldest girl. She had an older brother, but she was one of the oldest. And one of her brothers, one of my uncles, was killed in a motorcycle accident just before I was born. And she has a sort of on-off relationship with the others. One of them she absolutely hates. When he split up with his wife, she deliberately made friends with. She deliberately created a very close friendship with his ex-wife just to piss him off. I mean, that's kind of. She was very vindictive, my mum, very vindictive indeed. But my grandfather, yeah, just giving you a bit of background here. Oh, my grandfather's a complete scumbag. He's a fucking bastard. He not only showed no interest in me, he was brutal, he was violent, he was hostile. And he lived in the world, kind of lived in the world. He's one of these people who just lives in the world of their own. He takes no interest in you. Then sometimes you do something wrong. On one occasion, I snapped at my grandmother. I thought she was being too nosy. And he reached over, he grabbed my wrist like that. I was about 11 years old at the time. And he twisted my arm and he shouted at me. And it really hurt. And my parents did nothing about it. Apart from that, he hardly had anything to do with me. I mean, he insisted on speaking to me in English, which he could barely speak. Very, very bad English. My grandmother spoke good English. He couldn't hardly speak a word. Yeah, he insisted on always talking to me in English, even though I was fluent in Dutch in those days. I could speak to him easily in his own language, but he didn't speak to me in Dutch because he wanted nothing to do with me. He's a fucking cunt. I didn't go to his funeral. Funny enough, my mum was really upset with me when I didn't go to his funeral. When he died. He died very old. He was almost as old as Henry Kissinger. And my mum said, "What? He's your grandfather?" And I said, "Yes. I haven't seen him for 14 years, and I don't like the bastard. So I'm not going to his funeral." I've been watching some of Stefan Molyneux's videos on BitChute now. He's been kicked off YouTube about defooing and things like that. Which I've kind of done that with my mum's family. It was confusing for me as a child because my mum and dad were keen to bring me up. You see, some of you are switching off already. I understand that. If you want to switch off and not watch this video, that's fine. I understand that. There'll be different videos coming along soon. I won't always dwell on this sort of thing. But I came to this peaceful spot here to talk, try to be uninterrupted. You see, it was confusing to me as a child because children are naturally logical and judicious. This is the thing. Children are natural scientists. They're natural skeptics with a C. You know, for them, they use the brain the way the brain is meant to be used. That is, they spontaneously understand ethics and logic. It's not that no one has to teach them that. It's absolutely intrinsic. It's something you're born with. It's an instinct. And children. This is why children are so good at spotting hypocrisy, aren't they? And they haven't yet learned the sophistry of adult life. The classic example is the father who sits his son down one day and he says, "Son, when you grow up, it's very important you don't smoke. It's very bad for you, you mustn't do it." And while he's saying this, he'll pull out a fag, he'll light it up and he'll start puffing away. "Don't smoke, son. It's really bad and you mustn't do it. So do as I tell you, you mustn't smoke." The kid is looking at him thinking, "But Dad, you're doing it." And then that puts the father in a very difficult position because he has to say, "Yeah, I know I'm doing it, son, but you still shouldn't smoke." And that's the child. As the child grows over, as the child grows up, they become more conformist. They learn to put these very important, very obvious questions to one side for the sake of fitting in with society. You essentially have to offline your logical and ethical circuits in order to be part of the network of conventional humanity. It's a shame. It's not how it should be. I was very careful to protect my daughter from that sort of thing when I was bringing her up. I think the thing I'm probably most proud of in my entire life is my daughter, my 26-year-old daughter, who from the moment she was born, or even before she was born, I think even when I was a little kid and I was going through these kinds of experiences, I made a promise to myself, you know, if I ever have a child, and I was far too young to have children. This is when I was being abused by Centaur and by Isabel Menzies Live. If I ever have a child when I grow up, I promise I will never allow what was done to me to be done to them. Never. I swear it, and that's an oath I've kept. And I've also been logical and I've been ethical with my daughter. But where was I? Yeah, my granddad. My grandmother was all right. She was more approachable than my granddad, but she was quite nice in many ways. But both of them were very self-centered and pretty much dominated the family, and they basically had their way over everything. What I'm getting to here is the hypocrisy of my parents. My parents would say things like, "That's not fair, that's not right, you mustn't do that." You know, which parents must do with their children. But then we go to the Netherlands, we go to Holland. It's the Netherlands, actually. People call Holland, they think the country is Holland. No, Holland is actually just two provinces on the western peninsula of the Netherlands. The Netherlands is the entire country. And my family actually come from the other end of the country. They come from the far southeast in Limburg, which is quite different to the rest of the country in general. It's very socially conservative. It's more like Belgium, actually, in that sense. It's primarily Roman Catholic rather than the various Dutch Protestant churches, which the rest of the country has. And there's quite steep hills there. My parents live in quite a hilly area, which is unusual for the Netherlands. Yeah. Anyway, my grandparents, that is. Sorry. We went over there. You see, we'd go over to visit my family every school holiday, and suddenly I'd be immersed in a world where those rules didn't apply. You know, you mustn't do that. It's not fair, or that's not right. You know, these things my parents were teaching me as a child. Suddenly I've been immersed in a world where I've been immersed into a completely different world where these things didn't matter to certain people. Certain people were exempt from those rules, and my parents, the people who were enforcing those rules on me, were complicit in that exemption. In other words, you know, my grandparents and indeed other members of my family, usually the older generation, they were allowed to behave in the most horrific, antisocial manner imaginable. In any way, they could be rude, they could be aggressive, they could be selfish, they could be unreasonable, and in some cases, in the case of my grandfather, violent. And they were allowed to get away with it. You know, I sometimes ask, why are they doing this? Why are you letting them? Why won't you say anything? They go, ooh, they just avoid the question. They'd avoid the question. And that was confusing to me as a child. You get a lot of this hypocrisy I can't stand. I've told you before about this new age woman I once knew. Oh, she was one of these friends, you know, I call them pseudo friends, people who say, oh, I'm your friend Ben, I'm your friend Ben, and they don't act like it. I won't go into details about this, but the new agers are like that. They're very hypocritical. That's too much of a tangent to go off on. You're all switching off now, aren't you? So I did feel a lot of hatred from my family, for some members of my family, and I still do. But it's, you see, the thing about this hatred, I mean, the new age, I'm coming back to the new age, you must absolve yourself of hate. Hate is bad. Just don't hate and just love. Oh, Slackser, but this is another reason it makes this video very Slackserian, because Slackser's always talking on this subject as well. You must not hate, just love, 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 and let go your hate. Well, that's easier said than done. And I've come to believe actually that hatred is not actually, it doesn't have to be destructive. I think it becomes destructive if you let it rule your life, if you don't integrate it. And you simply react to the emotion. This was the problem of the Ahab character in Herman Melville's Moby Dick. I don't know if you've ever read the book or seen the film. But it's about a man who's the captain of a whaling ship, and he becomes obsessed with killing this whale. It's not just any whale, but a particular whale, a white whale called Moby Dick, a whale who bit his leg off, and he's got one leg, and he walks around with a prosthetic leg. And he becomes so obsessed with this mission to kill this whale, as if it's a personal thing with the whale, that he ends up attacking the whale single-handed, and the whale and he both sink into the depths of the sea, locked in a tussle of hatred and death. And Ahab kills himself in his quest to destroy the whale. But you don't have to be like Ahab. You can integrate your hatred. You can essentially have a relationship with that emotion rather than simply reacting to it. And I think that's the stage I have met. I do feel hatred from my grandfather and from my mother. I mean, you see, I'm sure if someone were here now, probably, I've never talked to my dad about this, and I can't, but if I did, he'd probably say, oh, you must forgive your mum. I said, no. Well, firstly, you can't forgive someone, really. It's too late. She's gone. I mean, she may be in another world. I might have a chance to meet up with her and maybe make amends in a future life, or in the world between worlds. I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to say I'm going to forgive her and not hate her when I don't think that's possible here in this world now. And the same with my granddad. It was one of the worst things my mum ever did to me. I think I mentioned in the background video, I think, about how she tried to destroy my family. But she essentially told lies to social workers during a period of time when my daughter was under a care order, or they were going to introduce a care order in court. And my mother lied. I was assessed by a psychologist for this court, and my mum lied to that psychologist to try and get my daughter taken away from me. It's only natural I'd hate someone who would do something like that. It took me a long time to forgive my father, actually, because he's not malicious like my mother, but he's incredibly weak, and he echoed everything she said. He didn't resist. He didn't stand up to her. This is why I keep going on at him today about he's got himself a really nice girlfriend now, who I talked about in the Lapis conference video. She's a bit brusque and bossy, but she does respect him. She's a decent woman, You've got to stand up to her, Dad. You've got to stand up to her. So I don't have a problem with my dad. I don't hate my dad. I'm frustrated by his apathy, but you know, I can't hate someone who does something bad out of weakness. I can only hate someone who does something bad out of malice, like my mum did. Funnily enough, while my mum was lying to me, to the social workers, one of the things she said about me was, she said, he's just like my father. So she was comparing me to my grandfather. Which is what makes it bad, is that my mum told... my grandfather, I said, was a violent, brutal man, but he wasn't as bad as... I think my mum painted him even worse than he actually was. For example, she had this story she told that he'd sexually abused her. Basically, this was her Me Too moment. And she told me and my brother and my dad that my grandfather, we called him Opa, which is simply the Dutch word for granddad, that Opa had abused her sexually. I don't think that was true, actually. None of the other family... my brother asked the other family about it, they all denied it. Now, of course, that can happen, but knowing my mum's track record of honesty, you know, the fact that she was an extremely deceptive person generally, I do call it into question. And I'm not a feminist. I've told you before. You know very well I'm not a feminist. I'm not into this believe all women thing. I don't do that. So he might have been many things, but I don't think he was a sexual abuser. I could be wrong there, but well, again, that's not something that can be sorted out right here and now. It's funny, this older generation of my mum's family, they were like, I don't know where they were quite well off, actually. I don't know where they got their money from, because my granddad was actually, he worked on the railways, he was like working class, yet when he became pretty wealthy, and some people have claimed that during the German occupation during World War II, he was basically what they would call, I mean, it's unfair to call him a collaborator, because half the population of the Netherlands actually, you know, this idea of the Germans, you know, some people say Nazi occupation, but in some cases, for example, certainly in Austria, and in many cases, to a great extent in the Netherlands, especially among the Catholic Limburgers, it was actually quite popular. The annexation by Germany was quite popular. And there's always this rumour that he was basically, he was actually a spy for the Germans, and he was giving out the names of resistance fighters and things like this, and they gave him some money. I don't know what it was, what the truth is, but either way, he became very wealthy during the course of his life. By the time, so he may have been one of these people like Leon de Grelle, who, the Dutch people who basically supported the Germans in the war. He might be one of these people, we don't know. Again, the family don't, it's not something the family really discuss. Some of them do it in jest, but again, if I'm wrong there, I apologise. But as I said, he's not someone I like, he's not someone I feel any qualms about. I'm not going to hold back. And no bugger who knows him anyways watching this, anyways, I don't care. I've not seen any member of my mum's family since her funeral in November 2006. I've had no contact with them at all. I had a couple of them on Facebook for a while. I think they blocked me or unfriended me, or I've unfriended them, I can't remember, but I never looked at their pages. It's odd, you know, because my mum's family, the older generation, like I said, they were all unquestionably, most of them were pretty horrible people. They weren't all as bad as my granddad, but even the ones like my grandmother they were very selfish, and they were very inconsiderate, very unreasonable people. She used to sulk. My grandmother used to go, oh, if something happened she didn't like, or someone did something she didn't like, she used to go, oh, like that. And my parents, the immediate response of my parents and my mum and my uncles and aunts was simply just appease them, just cave in and give them whatever they want to make them happy. You know, my grandmother, for example, if you were in the middle of a conversation, right, she would walk straight up and interrupt and butt in. She wouldn't wait for you to finish talking. She'd walk straight up and interrupt you. And I objected to that once, and my mum gave me a stern, just went like that, just say, don't object, let them just do whatever they like. But it's funny, you know, because you know this catchphrase. Oh, the society worships youth and beauty. I mean, that's true. But you see, my mum's family worshipped age and decrepitude, because it was like you've got to pass, right? If you reached a certain age, if you became like as old as them, which would be, I mean, they were all ancient. My mum's family were very long lived. I mean, none of them actually died before their late 90s. They're naturally a very long-lived family. All that generation are gone now, but they all died in their late 90s. One of them was 99. That's my auntie Toos. Again, it's a common Dutch name, Toos. And none of them watch me, so I'm not breaching any confidentialities. My family, they worshipped age and decrepitude. It's like if you become one of these ancient immortals, you know, then you could just do whatever you liked. The rules of polite society and civil and virtuous behaviour just didn't apply to you anymore, and you could just do whatever you wanted. I used to joke with my parents didn't like me making this joke, but I remember being very young and saying to them, when I get that old, can I be a bastard too? I said that to my dad and he went like that. I saw them at my mum's funeral. They came up and shook my hands. And then that was it. I haven't seen them since, I haven't spoken to them since. My brother formally separated, he defooed them formally. I mean, my brother doesn't know what that term means, but Stephen Molyneux has this thing called defooing. Fooing stands for F-O-O, family of origin, and defooing is breaking contact and ending your relationship with your family of origin. Now, what Molyneux means by that is your close family or immediate nuclear family, such as your mum and dad, brother, sister, etc. He defooed his parents and his brother. He talks about this in some of his videos. Some of his listeners and viewers have defooed as well. Now, my brother defooed the extended family. He said to them, "I don't want anything more to do with you because you're a bunch of scumbags." And I mean, a bunch of scumbags. He was referring to certain people in particular because he hated my grandfather too. Now, he believes my mum's Me Too story. I don't, but even taking that away, my grandfather was a complete and utter fucking bastard. He was a piece of shit. And so I was behind my brother on that. And I didn't do anything formally. I didn't say anything formally to them. But I went along. I didn't have anything to do with them. This was just after my mum's funeral, where the family, you know, my immediate family was going through a transition with my mum not being around. I was in a position where, and it's no exaggeration to say this, that I gained on that day, on the 28th of November 2006, I gained something I'd never had before, and that was a father. I got a father for the first time in my life. Because before that date, before my mum died, I had no father. I had my mother and her pet robot. Because that's all he was. He was completely under her spell, under her will. For a while she was under the spell of Centaur and Isabel Menzies Lithe. Yeah, I mean, I could go on for hours about that, and I have done in the background links. You see, I got notice from my dad. I heard from my dad that Beatrice, my cousin, her husband, had committed suicide. I've got no idea why. I know that the rates of suicide are actually spiraling upwards at the moment, especially among white men, which is why there's no really official reaction, because no one cares about white men. And he was a white man. He was 49, just 49 years old, which is not old these days. The reasons why, I don't know. I don't know. As I said, because I don't know them. But I heard through my dad, and I had this sort of, do I say anything? Do I write to my cousin Beatrice and say anything? Because I'd gone along with my brother when it came to defooing the entire lot of them. But this was different. I mean, this was a moment of terrible tragedy. This is a horrible thing that's just happened. And the fact that I was with my brother, the fact that I wasn't close to my cousin, and I'm not close to my cousin, and the fact that my brother had defooed the entire lot of them, didn't make it any less of a tragedy. It still made it something horrible I wish had not happened. And it didn't stop me feeling a moment of pity for my cousin and her children, her 15-year-old and her 12-year-old. And so I almost drafted, like I didn't draft it, but I went through my head, shall I write them an email, just condolences and things like that. And I didn't. I chose not to in the end. Am I mean? Is that horrible? Is that cruel? Is that vicious? Would it have made any difference to Beatrice and the children if I had simply sent a condolences message? Was that a nasty thing I just did? I'm sure the comments boxes are now going to fill up with people saying yes or no to that in answer to that question. But it's done. What's done is done. I think then what happened next was I actually received something through the post. It actually went to where I used to live. It didn't go to my current address, because my family don't know my current address. But I had a phone call from the people who live in the house I used to live in before 2011, when I moved to my current address, and they said, "Oh, there's a letter for you. It looks like it's some kind of greetings card." So I went round there. It was a letter from the undertakers in Zettergenbos, Netherlands, where the family are based, and it was basically a funeral invitation. Firstly, for a formal viewing of the body, and then on the Wednesday, and then the following Friday there'd be the funeral. I was invited to both. I attended neither of them. I didn't reply to the card. I don't know if that's good or bad, I'm not sure. Oh, I'm not saying it's not good, but is it bad? Should I have said something? Because I am sorry that it happened. I think it's an awful thing that happened. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, let alone my cousin. The thing is about my cousin Beatrice, she was part of that family, of course, who my brother defooed, but she never did anything bad to me. She was just indifferent. See, my family, my Dutch family, my mother's family, there was my grandfather, who was a cunt, who treated me like shit, and I hated. And there was the rest of them I didn't really hate, but I didn't like them much either. We were just indifferent to each other. It was just completely neutral. They were virtually strangers. They're still strangers to me. Still strangers, total strangers. And Beatrice was somebody I really wasn't close to. I didn't dislike her, I had no problems with her. She was a pleasant enough girl, a couple of years older than me. She wasn't nasty to me at all, but she wasn't nice to me either. We just never really had much to do with each other. Her cousin, her brother, sorry, she had a younger brother who was called, I'll call him Andy. That's actually virtually a translation of his real name, actually, but it doesn't matter. No one's going to know who they are. As I said, they're not watching this. I got on a bit better with him. I was quite close to him in a way. I used to play with him. I could get on with him. But again, we had a lot of differences and we clashed a bit. We didn't fall out, but we had a couple of arguments and things. But again, he's not someone I really had any... It's not someone I was terribly fond of. Not someone I was terribly close to. He annoyed me, actually, when we were both in our mid-teens, because he's about my age. When we were both in our mid-teens, he became kind of very much a trendy kind of person. He'd gel his hair and use sprays, sort of get his teeth whitened and things like that. I thought he was a bit of a poser. But so we used to play. Then our games got a bit more. The competition in our games got a bit more intense. For example, we used to play pool and things, and when I beat him, we almost had a fight. Oh yeah. Again, someone I'm not really. I could play with and get on with, but not really close to. And again, someone I've had nothing to do with probably since we grew up. So these people. See, the person I'm ignoring, Beatrice, never did anything bad to me. I've got no reason to dislike her. Unlike my grandfather, I've got no reason. And the older generation, who, like I said, he was a scumbag, and the rest of them were just selfish and ignorant. I've got no reason to dislike Beatrice. I'm just neutral towards her. She's a stranger. So I said nothing about this horrible thing that happened. I've got no idea. Of course, I don't know why it happened. I kind of wondering, I'm thinking, why would he do that? Why would he take his own life, especially when he's got kids? I don't know. But it's the most horrible thing in the world. I'm so sorry it happened. I'll never say this to Beatrice, but I am very sorry that this has happened to her family. It's an awful thing. But they're not really family. Family. They're related to me by blood, and that's it. And as Molyneux rightly points this out, what's that got to do with anything? Why does that give them additional rights to your individual sovereignty? Why does it give them exemption from how you would regard people who are not your blood relatives? Why should they be treated? Why should they be entitled to different treatment? And not only that, in my case, some of them were entitled to different treatment than others. My parents imposed rules and restrictions on me, which they would not on others. And indeed, the thing is, my mum said this. My mum got very angry with this. Is before she turned against me. She said that my grandparents treated my cousins as favourites when we were kids. That is, my two aunts had children and treated them as favourites, and sort of like snubbed me and my brother a little bit. And she thought it was an attack against her, which it might well have been. It might well have been. My mum had this thing. My mum did this. She did it was a kind of due diligence thing when my grandparents died. Her parents. She went to their funerals because and she put pictures of them up on the walls and things like that. But you see, despite the fact that she made these horrible accusations about my grandfather, even worse than what he actually did to me, and worse than what I believe he actually did. And she also used to complain all the time about her mother, my grandmother, Oma we used to call her, which is simply Granny in Dutch. She used to complain about them all the time behind their backs. She used to say about my grandmother, she used to say, I always say thank you 5 times for everything she does, and I think that's usually the trick. In other words, you've got to keep saying thank you over and over to her. She doesn't like it. But as Molyneux says, he said, I know exactly what he would say. I can hear Stephen Molyneux right now saying, and analysing exactly what my situation was and exactly what he would say about it. Get rid of them now. Get rid of them now. Defool them all now. Yes, yeah, he would. Yeah, he would say basically that your grandparents were horrible. You're right to have nothing to do with them. I don't know what he'd say about my mum and dad, but I mean, he would certainly support my brother defooing the extended family, my mother's family. My dad actually my brother gets very angry with my dad, because my dad's still really close to them, and he says, why do you keep kissing their ass and things like that? They're such horrible people. Truth of the matter is, they're not all horrible people. One of them in particular is, the others, because he's a brutal, violent man, and he's dead. And the others were they're all dead too. They were just selfish, self-centered, ignorant, stupid old people, and they're dead. The rest I consider that is my uncles and aunts and my cousins. I'm just indifferent. They were indifferent to me. They never actually asked me. They never really spoke to me properly. I mean, even my cousin Andy, who I was closest to, they wouldn't go up to me and ask me any questions about myself. They were never asked to hear my feelings or thoughts and opinions on anything. They never asked me how I was feeling or how I was or what was going on. What they would do is they had only one interest in anything to do with me, and that was, how's he getting on at school? Is he doing well at school? And they wouldn't ask me. They'd ask my mum and dad. All they wanted to do was they wanted to know how. As long as I passed my exams, I could hang for all they cared. As long as I passed my exams. I mean, when I failed my exams, so I failed all but one of my exams. They were mortified. They never spoke to me about it, but my mum and dad said, oh, they are very, very upset. Moeder and vader are very, very upset. That's mother and father in Dutch. Moeder and vader are very, very upset. They are very, very... They say verschrikkelijk. Oh, verschrikkelijk it is in Dutch, you know. It's terrible, it's terrible. They think it's terrible. So it's just they ignored me, basically. They ignored me. There's a part, and then you see, this is why I feel guilty, because I felt a sense of satisfaction, and it's a horrible thing to say when such an awful thing has happened to my cousin. But my next thought went through my head when I decided I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to write back and issue any condolences, despite the fact that I do feel sorry for her and what's happened, and for the family, the whole family. The next thought was, they've been ignoring me, and now it's my turn to ignore them. And I thought, and then I stopped myself and thought, Ben, I looked at myself in the mirror and I said, Ben, that's a horrible thing to think. But that is what I thought. Okay, so I've shared that all with you now. I hope you haven't been too bored. I know some of you won't have watched this video, which is fair enough. But just let me know what you think. And like I said, I'm only telling you people about it because I have no other confidants, really. I have a couple of people on. Like I said, I spoke to a couple of people online before. Again, not family members, just people I know online. One person advised me very much not to make this video. It's possible I won't upload it, in which case you won't be watching this, but I think I will upload it. So thank you for listening to me ramble on about this particular problem. I'll put some links in the description box to some videos, again personal videos, which you might find a little bit more interesting. Okay, see you later. There's more coming very soon, and it's more of my usual sort of thing, so if those of you who roll your eyes at this video will hopefully like the ones that are coming up. See ya.